Get her out now. She's the reason this school is in trouble. The words echoed across the crowded front steps of Riverside Heights Middle School, cutting through the noise of cameras, microphones, and worried parents. Dr. Maya Carter stood still beneath the gray morning sky, her teacher badge hanging quietly from her navy blazer, while dozens of eyes turned toward her as if she were a stranger instead of the woman who had run toward danger to protect her students only hours earlier. The school courtyard had never felt so cold. Reporters pushed forward, asking questions faster than anyone could answer. "Did you ignore safety procedures?" one reporter shouted. "Are you responsible for what happened inside the building?" another asked. Maya looked past the cameras and saw the faces that mattered most. Students wrapped in blankets, parents holding their children close. Young lives that were safe because someone refused to walk away. But standing beside the school entrance was Principal Jonathan Whitmore, a man who had spent years protecting the reputation of Riverside Heights more than anything else. His expression was serious, controlled, almost rehearsed. "Dr. Carter," he said into the microphones, "the school must take responsibility for what occurred." Maya looked at him, waiting for the truth to follow. It never came. "Your actions created unnecessary risk," Jonathan continued. The crowd grew silent. The woman who had spent 12 years teaching science, mentoring students, and staying late to help children who needed someone to believe in them, was now being presented as the problem. "That's not what happened," Maya said calmly. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. "I was trying to make sure every student got out safely." Jonathan avoided her eyes for a moment. Then he turned back toward the cameras. "Effective immediately, Doctor. Maya Carter is no longer employed by Riverside Heights Middle School." For a few seconds, nobody moved. The announcement seemed impossible to understand. A teacher had protected her students, and now she was the one being removed. Maya felt the weight of the moment settle around her. The polished windows of the school reflected her image back at her, a teacher standing alone in a place where she had once belonged. Behind the crowd, a young student named Noah Williams watched with confusion. He remembered Maya's voice telling everyone to stay calm. He remembered her making sure every child was accounted for. He remembered that she never left anyone behind. "That's not fair," Noah whispered. But the cameras had already moved on. They were searching for a headline, a simple explanation, someone to blame. Jonathan stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Maya, this is bigger than one person." She looked at him quietly. "No, Jonathan, it's about one thing." He paused. "What?" she asked. "Whether doing the right thing still matters when nobody wants to hear it." The principal had no answer. Around them, the school continued moving forward. Teachers guided students inside. Parents slowly walked away. The morning sun reached across the pavement, but Maya felt a distance growing between herself and the place she had dedicated so many years to. She removed her classroom keys from her pocket and placed them carefully into the hands of the school secretary. No anger, no argument, just a quiet acceptance that sometimes the people who stand for others are the first ones asked to stand alone. As she walked away from Riverside Heights Middle School, nobody knew the full story yet. Nobody knew what the cameras would reveal. Nobody knew what forgotten records would uncover. And nobody knew that the woman they had just pushed away was connected to a chapter of the school's history that Jonathan Whitmore had never forgotten. 3 days before the cameras arrived, before the accusations filled the morning news, and before Riverside Heights Middle School became a place of whispers and unanswered questions, Dr. Maya Carter was simply a teacher walking through familiar hallways with a stack of science papers in her hands. Every morning at 6:45 a.m., before most students entered the building, Maya unlocked her classroom door and turned on the lights. The soft glow from the ceiling lamps would fill the room, revealing walls covered with student projects, handwritten notes, and small reminders that every child who entered deserved to feel seen. To many people, she was only a science teacher. But to the students of Riverside Heights, she was the person who noticed when someone was struggling, the person who stayed after school when a student needed extra help, and the person who believed a difficult beginning did not have to define someone's future. Maya had spent 12 years at the school, but her connection to teaching began long before she ever stood in front of a classroom. She grew up in Richmond, Virginia, in a neighborhood where opportunities were not always easy to find. Her mother worked long hours as a nurse assistant, and her father repaired heating systems across the city. They did not have much, but they gave Maya something more valuable than money. They taught her responsibility, patience, and compassion. People may not always understand you, her mother used to tell her, but your actions will always introduce you before your words do. Maya carried those words everywhere. When she became a teacher, she did not see students as test scores or attendance numbers. She saw children with stories, fears, dreams, and challenges that most people never noticed. In her classroom, every student had a place. Noah Williams, the seventh grader who watched silently as Maya walked away from the school days later, was one of those students. At the beginning of the school year, Noah rarely raised his hand. He kept his science notebook closed and avoided speaking during group projects. Maya noticed. One afternoon, she found him sitting alone near the school library. "You know, the best scientists are not the ones who always have the answers," she told him. "They are the ones brave enough to keep asking questions." Noah looked up and asked, "What if I am not good at it?" Maya smiled. "Then we learn. That is what school is for." Slowly, Noah began to change. He started participating. He started believing he belonged. Moments like that were why Maya became a teacher. She was never searching for awards or recognition. She wanted students to discover their own confidence. But outside her classroom, another story was developing inside Riverside Heights. Principal Jonathan Whitmore had spent years building the school's public image. The polished entrance, the carefully prepared announcements, the impressive statistics displayed at every community meeting. To Jonathan, success meant keeping everything under control. Parents needed confidence. The district needed results. The school board needed someone who could promise there would never be a crisis. Maya understood pressure, but she believed protecting people mattered more than protecting appearances. She often disagreed with Jonathan's approach. "A school is not just a building with good numbers," she once told him during a staff meeting. "It is a place where people trust us with their children." Jonathan had listened, but he never truly answered. He respected her dedication, yet he saw her independence as a challenge. Maya was the kind of person who spoke when something felt wrong, even when silence would have been easier. And that was exactly what made the events that followed so painful. Because when the moment came for someone to choose between truth and reputation, Riverside Heights would discover who Maya Carter really was. Not through her words, not through her title, but through the choices she made when nobody expected her to stand. Before Riverside Heights Middle School became a place filled with questions and uncertainty, there was a quiet battle happening behind closed doors. It was not a battle between people who hated each other. It was a struggle between two very different ideas of what leadership meant. For Principal Jonathan Whitmore, leadership was about control, stability, and making sure the school always appeared successful. For Dr. Maya Carter, leadership was about trust, honesty, and protecting the people who depended on her. Jonathan had been principal of Riverside Heights for 8 years. His office sat on the second floor of the main building, overlooking the front courtyard where students gathered every morning. The walls were covered with framed awards, community recognition certificates, and photographs of school improvement ceremonies. Every detail represented the image he worked so hard to maintain. He often told his staff, "A school's reputation takes years to build, and only one moment to destroy." Many teachers agreed with him. They understood the pressure that came with running a public school. Parents wanted answers. The district wanted progress. The school board wanted confidence. But over time, some staff members noticed something different about Jonathan. He became more focused on avoiding problems than solving them. During meetings, he often asked the same question before anything else. How will this look to the community? Maya noticed that question appearing more often than, what do our students need? One afternoon, after a staff meeting about student safety programs, Maya stayed behind while the other teachers left. She gathered her notes and looked toward Jonathan's office door, which was still open. "Can I talk with you for a minute?" she asked. Jonathan looked up from his computer. "Of course, Maya." She stepped inside. "I've been thinking about the way we handle concerns from teachers and students. Sometimes people are afraid to speak because they think they will create problems." Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "Maya, every organization needs structure." "I agree," she replied, But structure should help people speak, not make them afraid to speak. Jonathan was quiet. He respected Maya's dedication, but conversations like this made him uncomfortable. She was not someone who simply followed instructions. She asked questions. She challenged decisions. She believed honesty was part of education. "You are a great teacher," Jonathan said finally, "but sometimes you make situations more complicated than they need to be." Maya looked at him carefully. "Sometimes the truth feels complicated because it asks us to change." Jonathan did not respond. Their conversation ended politely, but the difference between them remained. Maya believed a leader should stand with people during difficult moments. Jonathan believed a leader should prevent difficult moments from happening in the first place. Meanwhile, the school board was preparing for an important review. Riverside Heights had been receiving positive attention in the district, and Jonathan hoped to use that success to move into a larger administrative role in the future. Elaine Brooks, the chairwoman of the school board, frequently reminded him how important public confidence was. "The district is watching this school," she told him during a private meeting. "One major mistake can change everything." Jonathan nodded. "I understand." But those words stayed in his mind. One mistake, one headline, one moment that could erase years of work. That fear shaped many of his decisions, even ones he did not fully recognize. Then came the morning when everything changed. It started as an ordinary school day in Richmond, Virginia. Students walked through the hallways carrying backpacks. Teachers prepared lessons. Maya arranged materials for her science class and greeted students by name. Nothing suggested that within hours, Riverside Heights would face a crisis that would test every person inside the building. A crisis where one person would run toward responsibility, while others would look for someone to blame. And when the truth finally came out, Jonathan Whitmore would have to face the one thing he had spent years trying to avoid: the difference between protecting a reputation and protecting people. The morning began like any other school day at Riverside Heights Middle School. The halls were filled with the familiar sounds of lockers opening, shoes moving across polished floors, and students greeting friends before the first bell. Sunlight passed through the large windows near the science wing, creating warm patterns across the classroom walls where Dr. Maya Carter had spent countless hours encouraging curiosity and confidence. She wrote the day's lesson on the whiteboard and smiled as students entered. "Good morning, everyone. Today we are talking about something that affects all of us: responsibility." Noah Williams placed his backpack beside his desk and looked toward the board. He had learned to pay attention whenever Maya introduced a lesson because she always connected science to real life. "Does responsibility mean doing everything perfectly?" one student asked. Maya shook her head. "No. Responsibility means making the best choice you can with the information you have." Those words would become important later. At 10:17 that morning, the normal rhythm of Riverside Heights changed. A strange smell was reported near the science preparation area. A few teachers noticed something unusual, and the school staff began following safety procedures. Maya was preparing materials for her next class when she noticed the concern spreading through the hallway. She stepped outside and saw students looking around, confused by the sudden instructions from staff members. "Everyone needs to stay calm and follow directions," she said, guiding students toward the designated area. But then Maya noticed something that made her stop. Not every student had reached safety yet. Noah was among the students being moved with the group, but another student was still looking for a missing backpack near the science wing. A teacher called out, "Maya, stay with your class. The staff will handle it." Maya looked toward the hallway. Her expression changed. She knew that every second mattered when a student felt lost or afraid. "I understand," she answered, "but I cannot leave someone behind." She moved carefully toward the area where the student was last seen, making sure to follow the school's emergency instructions. The hallway that had been filled with laughter only minutes before now felt unfamiliar. Classroom doors were closed. The usual morning energy had disappeared. Maya called out calmly, "I am here. You are not alone." A small voice answered from nearby. "Miss Carter?" She followed the sound and found the student waiting, frightened but safe. "I thought nobody knew I was still here," the student said. Maya smiled gently. "Someone always knows. Someone always comes back." She helped the student return with the others, and soon the entire school community was outside, while emergency teams checked the building. Parents began arriving. Teachers counted students. Everyone waited for updates. In the middle of the confusion, Maya stood near the entrance watching the children reunite with their families. Noah's mother held him tightly, then looked toward Maya. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I do not know what we would have done." Maya simply nodded. "I am just glad he is safe." But while students and parents saw a teacher who cared, the school administration saw something different. Jonathan Whitmore stood nearby speaking with district officials. His face showed concern, but his questions were not about the students first. "Do we know what caused this?" he asked. "Was every procedure followed?" The officials explained that they were still investigating. Jonathan looked toward the cameras gathering outside the school entrance. News crews had already arrived. The pressure he feared for years was suddenly standing right in front of him. Elaine Brooks from the school board called him. "Jonathan, the district needs a statement." He looked across the courtyard and saw Maya speaking with students. For a moment, he remembered the conversation they had days earlier about choosing truth over appearance. But the cameras were waiting, the questions were coming, and Jonathan Whitmore had a decision to make. A decision between protecting the image of Riverside Heights or standing beside the person who had always protected its students. The cameras arrived before the questions had even been answered. By the afternoon, the front entrance of Riverside Heights Middle School had transformed from a place of learning into a place of pressure. Reporters stood behind the yellow safety line, microphones raised, waiting for someone to explain what had happened. Parents wanted reassurance, the district wanted information, and the school board wanted a message that would protect the reputation they had worked so hard to build. Inside the main office, Jonathan Whitmore stared through the glass window at the crowd outside. His phone continued to ring. Every conversation carried the same concern. "What are you going to tell the public?" Elaine Brooks asked during another call. Jonathan looked exhausted. "The investigation has not finished yet." There was a pause. "People do not want uncertainty, Jonathan. They want accountability." Those words stayed in his mind. Accountability. A word that could mean responsibility, but also a person to blame. In the hallway outside the office, Maya Carter gathered her personal belongings from her classroom. A few students stood nearby, watching quietly. They knew something was wrong. They had seen the news reports. They had heard adults discussing what happened. Noah Williams approached her slowly. "Miss Carter, are you leaving?" Maya looked at him and gave a small smile. "Only for today, Noah." But even she did not know what tomorrow would bring. She placed a few books into a small box. A framed photo of her student sat on her desk. She touched it for a moment, remembering every child who had walked into that room believing they were not good enough, only to leave with more confidence than before. A knock came at the door. Jonathan stood there. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise from the hallway seemed far away. "Maya," he said quietly, "the board is meeting." She looked at him. "About what?" Jonathan hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. "You already know," she said. Jonathan looked down. "The district is asking for a clear explanation." Maya held his gaze. "The clear explanation is that students are safe." "Maya, this is complicated." "No," she replied calmly. "The situation is complicated. The truth is not." Jonathan had no response. A few hours later, the school board meeting began. The room was filled with community members, teachers, and reporters. Elaine Brooks sat at the center of the table, papers organized neatly in front of her. Jonathan stood beside her, prepared to make a statement. "Riverside Heights Middle School takes every safety concern seriously," he began. "After reviewing today's events, we have determined that certain decisions made during the emergency response did not follow proper procedures." The room became quiet. Everyone knew what came next. Maya sat in the audience, her hands folded calmly. Elaine looked toward her. "Dr. Carter, do you have anything to say?" Maya stood. She looked at the people in the room, then at the students sitting in the back row. "Yes," she said. "I want everyone to remember something. These children are not a public relations problem. They are not numbers in a report. They are people who trusted us to protect them." Some people lowered their eyes, but Jonathan remained still. The decision had already been made. Elaine read the official statement. Effective immediately, Dr. Maya Carter's employment with Riverside Heights Middle School has been terminated pending further review. The room fell silent. A teacher covered her mouth in disbelief. Noah looked toward Maya with confusion. "But she helped us," he whispered. Maya heard him. She turned and gave him a reassuring look. "Keep learning," she said softly. "That is what matters." Outside the building, cameras followed her as she walked toward the parking lot. Reporters shouted questions. "Do you accept responsibility? Do you have anything to say to the parents?" Maya stopped for a moment. The wind moved gently through the trees beside the sidewalk. She looked back at Riverside Heights, the school where she had spent 12 years of her life. "I hope one day," she said, "people will remember the students before they remember the headlines." Then she continued walking. Behind her, the school doors closed. But the story of Maya Carter was far from finished. Because somewhere inside Riverside Heights, there was evidence that had not yet been discovered. Evidence that would show the world who she truly was, and why the people who judged her so quickly had been wrong. The days after Maya Carter left Riverside Heights Middle School felt strangely quiet. For 12 years, her mornings had begun with the sound of classroom doors opening, students asking questions, and the soft movement of papers being arranged before the first bell. Now, her apartment in Richmond, Virginia, was filled with a different kind of silence. A small kitchen table became her new workspace. Her teacher supplies sat in a box near the wall, waiting for a future she could not see yet. Maya did not spend her days asking why people had turned against her. She spent them thinking about the students. She wondered if Noah was still interested in science. She wondered if the younger students were sleeping peacefully after everything they experienced. Her phone received messages from parents, former students, and teachers who wanted to support her. But Maya rarely responded with anger. "The students are what matter," she told a former colleague who called one evening. "They should not have to carry the weight of what adults failed to handle." Meanwhile, inside Riverside Heights, the atmosphere had changed. The school looked the same from the outside. The brick walls, the front entrance, and the large windows all remained unchanged. But inside, conversations became quieter. Teachers noticed that many people were uncomfortable with how quickly Maya had been blamed. Some had been there that morning. They remembered how she guided students calmly. They remembered that she focused on keeping children safe, not protecting her own position. One science teacher, Daniel Harper, reviewed the emergency reports again and again. Something did not feel right. The official statement did not match what he remembered seeing. "She did not create confusion," he said quietly to another teacher. "She brought order when everyone else was trying to understand what was happening." The other teacher looked toward the hallway. "Then why did they remove her?" Daniel had no answer. In the principal's office, Jonathan Whitmore also struggled with the silence. The media attention had slowed, but the decision continued to follow him. Every time he walked through the school, he saw reminders of Maya. A science poster she created, a student project she helped organize, a thank you note from a family whose child improved because of her encouragement. He sat at his desk one evening after everyone had left and looked at the empty hallway outside his office window. For the first time, he allowed himself to question the decision. Had he protected the school, or had he protected himself? The question stayed with him. Then something unexpected happened. The school district received a request from an independent safety review team. They wanted access to all emergency records, including security footage, staff reports, and archived documents. Jonathan approved the request without hesitation, believing it would confirm the school's official statement. But the review process revealed something unusual. A security camera near the science wing had not been included in the original summary. The footage had been stored automatically but overlooked during the first review. When investigators opened the file, they saw a completely different picture of that morning. They saw Maya moving carefully through the building, following safety procedures, checking on students, and making sure every child was accounted for. They saw that her decisions were based on protecting students, not ignoring rules. The review team continued examining older records connected to Maya's employment history. One document caught their attention. It was from 11 years earlier, before Maya became one of Riverside Heights' most respected teachers. The record was connected to a school emergency in Norfolk, Virginia. The name at the top of the page was familiar: Jonathan Whitmore. The investigator slowly looked up from the file. "You need to see this," he said. The room became quiet, because hidden inside a forgotten archive was a story Jonathan had never expected to revisit. A story about a teacher who had once changed the course of his life. And now, years later, that same person was the one he had failed to protect. The room became silent as the investigator placed the old document on the table. Jonathan Whitmore stood frozen, staring at a name he had not seen in years. The paper was slightly faded, stored inside an archive folder that had been untouched for more than a decade. But the details were clear. The location was Norfolk, Virginia. The year was 2011, and the person listed in the report was Dr. Maya Carter. Jonathan slowly reached for the document. His hands were steady, but his expression changed. "This cannot be right," he whispered. The investigator looked at him carefully. "You know her?" Jonathan did not answer immediately. His mind had already traveled back 13 years, back to a time before Riverside Heights, before the school board, before titles and expectations changed the way he saw people. In 2011, Jonathan was not yet the principal of Riverside Heights. He was an assistant administrator at Harborview Academy in Norfolk. He was focused, ambitious, and determined to build a successful career in education. One afternoon, an unexpected situation forced the school staff to work together under pressure. Jonathan remembered feeling overwhelmed, unsure of what decision to make next. Then he remembered a young teacher who remained calm while everyone else was searching for answers. Her name was Maya Carter. She had been a new teacher at the time, but she carried herself with confidence beyond her years. She did not seek attention. She did not ask anyone to recognize her. She simply noticed what needed to be done and helped. Jonathan remembered her saying, "The students need us to stay calm. They need adults who can think clearly." Those words had stayed with him. After the situation ended, Jonathan had thanked her personally. "I do not know what would have happened without you," he told her. Maya had smiled and replied, "That is what teachers are supposed to do." Back in the review office, Jonathan slowly placed the document down. The investigator continued explaining. The archive records show Dr. Carter played a key role in helping students and staff during that event. There are also statements from people who were there. Jonathan looked away. For the first time in days, he was not thinking about the school board, the media, or his position. He was thinking about Maya standing outside Riverside Heights after being dismissed. He remembered her words. He remembered the disappointment in her eyes, not because she lost her job, but because she could not understand why people ignored the truth. Meanwhile, the investigation team continued reviewing the security footage from the recent incident. The video showed what the public had never seen. Maya was not careless. She was not ignoring safety procedures. She was acting with awareness and concern for her students. Every movement showed preparation. Every decision showed responsibility. The official statement from the school had created a story that did not match reality. The evidence was undeniable. Maya Carter had protected the students of Riverside Heights, just as she had protected others years earlier. One investigator looked at Jonathan and asked quietly, "Why was she removed before the review was complete?" Jonathan had no answer. The question was simple, but it carried the weight of everything he had avoided. He had been so focused on controlling the story that he never stopped to listen to the person who had always put others first. Later that evening, Jonathan returned to his office alone. The school was quiet. The same hallway where Maya once greeted students now felt different. He opened the drawer where he kept old recognition letters and found one from years ago. It was a handwritten note thanking him for supporting teachers who cared about students. He read it again, then placed it beside Maya's old records. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The person he had publicly blamed was the same person who had once reminded him why education mattered. Jonathan looked out at the empty courtyard. The truth had finally arrived, but it brought something heavier than embarrassment. It brought regret. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Whitmore understood that the greatest failure was not making a mistake. It was refusing to see the person who had been standing in front of him all along. The next morning, Jonathan Whitmore arrived at Riverside Heights Middle School earlier than usual. The parking lot was almost empty. and the quiet building felt completely different from the place that had been filled with cameras and questions only days before. He sat inside his office, looking at the investigation report placed in front of him. Every page carried the same message. Maya Carter had acted with responsibility. Maya Carter had protected students. Maya Carter had been telling the truth. But the hardest part was not reading the evidence. The hardest part was accepting his own choices. Jonathan had spent years believing that leadership meant having the right answer in every situation. Now he understood that leadership also meant admitting when he was wrong. He picked up his phone and searched for Maya's contact information. He had never deleted it, even after everything that happened. His finger paused over her name. For a moment, he thought about the meeting with the school board, the reporters, and the announcement that changed her life. Then he pressed call. Maya answered after a few rings. "Hello?" Her voice was calm, but distant. Jonathan took a breath. "Maya, it is Jonathan." There was a short silence. "I know," she replied. He looked down at the report on his desk. "I need to talk with you." Maya did not respond immediately. "About what?" she asked. Jonathan closed his eyes for a moment. "About the truth." Later that afternoon, they met at a small coffee shop near downtown Richmond. It was a simple place with wooden tables, warm lights, and quiet conversations from people enjoying their afternoon. Maya sat across from Jonathan, listening carefully. She did not come there looking for revenge. She did not come there expecting an apology to erase what happened. She came because she wanted to understand. Jonathan placed the investigation documents on the table. "The review confirmed everything you said," he explained. "The footage showed that you followed emergency procedures and focused on the students. The board has seen the evidence." Maya looked at the papers but remained silent. Jonathan continued. "There is also something else. The records from Norfolk. I did not know the person who helped me years ago was you until now." Maya looked up. "You remembered that day?" Jonathan nodded slowly. "I remembered the person who stayed calm when everyone else was uncertain. I remembered someone who reminded me what education was supposed to be." His voice became quieter. "And then I became the person who failed to do that for you." Maya looked toward the window. Outside, people walked along the sidewalk, unaware of the conversation happening inside. "Jonathan," she said softly, "the hardest part was not losing my position." He listened. "The hardest part was seeing students watch adults choose blame before they chose understanding." Jonathan lowered his eyes. Her words carried more weight than any accusation could have. "I am sorry," he said. "Not because the investigation proved you were right. I am sorry because I should have trusted the person I already knew you were." Maya remained quiet for a moment. Then she answered, "An apology matters when it changes what happens next." Jonathan nodded. "It will." The following day, Jonathan stood before the school board. The same room where Maya had been dismissed was now filled with teachers, parents, and community members. This time, there was no prepared statement designed to protect an image. There was only honesty. "We made a mistake," Jonathan said. The room became still. Dr. Maya Carter protected our students, and we failed to protect her. We allowed fear and reputation to influence a decision that should have been guided by truth. Elaine Brooks sat quietly, looking at the documents in front of her. The board members understood the seriousness of what had happened. Jonathan continued. "A school teaches more than lessons from books. It teaches values through actions. We cannot ask students to be honest if we are unwilling to practice honesty ourselves." Across town, Maya listened to the announcement. She did not celebrate. She did not feel satisfaction. Instead, she looked at a photo of her students on her desk and smiled softly. Because for Maya Carter, the goal was never to prove that she was better than anyone else. The goal was always to make sure people remembered what mattered most. Several months later, Riverside Heights Middle School looked different. The building was the same. The brick walls, the classrooms, and the familiar hallways remained exactly where they had always been. But something inside the school had changed. The difference was not found in new signs or new programs. It was found in the way people listened to each other. On a quiet Monday morning in Richmond, Virginia, Dr. Enan Sand, Maya Carter walked through the front entrance of Riverside Heights once again. This time, there were no cameras waiting, no reporters asking questions, No crowd searching for someone to blame. Instead, there were students standing near the hallway, smiling as they saw her return. Noah Williams was one of the first students to approach her. He held a science project folder in his hands, the same kind of folder Maya had encouraged him to use months earlier. "I finished my project," he said proudly. Maya smiled. "I knew you would." Noah looked around the hallway before asking, "Are you staying this time?" Maya looked at the students walking past them. She saw the same curiosity, the same energy, and the same hope that had always reminded her why she became a teacher. "Yes, Noah," she answered. "I am staying." The school had created a new student safety and leadership program, inspired by the lessons learned from the emergency. Maya was invited to help guide the program, not because of what happened to her, but because of what she had always represented: responsibility, compassion, courage. Principal Jonathan Whitmore also changed. He no longer entered meetings thinking only about how decisions would appear to the public. He started asking different questions. What do our students need? Who have we not listened to? Are we protecting people or just protecting our image? The change was not immediate. Trust takes time to rebuild. But every day, Jonathan worked to prove that his apology was more than words. One afternoon, he visited Maya's classroom while students were working on science experiments. He stood near the doorway for a moment, watching her explain a lesson. The room was filled with the same enthusiasm she had created for years. After class, Jonathan approached her. "You know, I used to think being a leader meant never showing uncertainty." Maya placed the papers on her desk and looked at him. "And now?" he asked. Jonathan smiled slightly. "Now I think leadership means being honest enough to learn." Maya nodded. "That is a good lesson for everyone." Outside the classroom window, the afternoon sunlight spread across the school courtyard. Students walked between buildings, laughing and sharing ideas. The place that had once been filled with suspicion had slowly become a place of understanding again. At the end of the school year, Riverside Heights held its annual student recognition ceremony. Parents filled the auditorium. Teachers sat together. The atmosphere was warm and peaceful. Jonathan stepped onto the stage, but this time he did not speak about achievements, rankings, or public recognition. He spoke about people. "A school is not defined by its buildings," he said. "It is defined by the people who choose to care when caring is difficult." He looked toward Maya, sitting among the teachers. "Some people remind us what integrity looks like. Some people show us that kindness is not weakness, it is strength." Maya lowered her eyes, quietly accepting the moment. She did not need applause. She had never searched for attention. She only wanted students to know that someone would always stand beside them. Years later, former students would remember many things about Riverside Heights. They would remember their favorite classes, their friends, and the moments that shaped their lives. But many of them would remember one lesson above all others: that the person with the least power in the room can still be the person with the greatest impact. And as Maya Carter walked through the school hallway one final time that day, the sunlight reflected across the classroom windows, the sound of students filled the air, and the quiet steps of a teacher who chose compassion over recognition carried a message that needed no explanation.